So to deploy this project, we're going to use npm run build again. So in our command line, we'll create a new tab and we'll cd into the chatbot-project folder. And if we need to, we can npm install and then npm run build. And this will convert all the React code into normal JavaScript and save it in a dist folder again. So notice that inside the dist folder, we actually just have normal HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code. So this is actually just an HTML website. And we can actually upload this code to any service that puts an HTML website on the internet. For example, here I use a service called GitHub Pages. And I can just upload this code to GitHub Pages and it will put it on the internet. No backend knowledge required. To learn more, you can actually follow the same steps as my video, how to put a HTML website on the internet. However, make sure you do the exercises in this lesson first, since there's still some small configuration changes that we need to make for this to work. So basically, if we just have a front end, we can just upload this code directly to the internet using something like GitHub Pages. But if our project has a backend as well, then we need to use a more complicated service like AWS to put the backend and the front end on the internet. In the rest of this lesson, we're going to improve our AWS setup to make it more real-world and professional. So we'll go back to the browser and we'll open AWS again. And I'm actually going to close some of these other tabs because we don't need them. And inside Elastic Beanstalk, in this project, we're going to go to the configuration section. And we're going to scroll down and find the configuration for instance traffic. If you don't see this, you can check the AWS troubleshooting guide in the description. So here we'll click Edit, and we're going to scroll until we find the capacity section. And here we'll look for something like environment type and a dropdown that says single instance. So we're going to change this to load balanced. So what this does is it adds another computer in front of our backend computer. This is called a load balancer. So what a load balancer does is, if we have a really busy website, one computer might not be enough to handle all the requests. So we can actually run the backend on multiple computers. And this load balancer will distribute the requests across these computers. This allows our website to handle much more users. So here, we can decide how many backend computers to run. Since we're just testing, we'll set this to a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 1. And then we'll scroll down and click Apply. And now Elastic Beanstalk will set up a load balancer computer in front of our backend. And this will take a few minutes to complete. After it finishes, we're going to go back to the configuration again. And we'll scroll down to the instance traffic settings and just make sure that min is 1 and max is 1. If it's not 1, we can click Edit and then scroll back down and then change it to 1. And we'll scroll down and click Apply again. So when that finishes, I'll just check it again. And now it's 1 and 1. So now our website setup looks like this. We have 3 computers: the front end, the back end, and the load balancer. This is closer to a real-world setup. Again, you can watch my video on backend overview to learn more about these concepts. Next, currently all the data for our React app like the products, the cart, and the orders, are saved in a database, and the database is saved in a file. However, when we put our React app on the internet, we usually put the database on a separate computer. And this lets us share the data between backend computers. So inside AWS, we're going to go to the configuration again, and we'll scroll down to the database configuration, and we'll click Edit. And inside the database section, we're going to scroll down and find Database, and we'll click Enable Database. Elastic Beanstalk will automatically create a new computer that's running a database, and it will connect this database to our backend. So we'll scroll down and look at these options. And here we can select the database that we want to use. So the e-commerce backend works with the database MySQL. So we're going to use that. And then here, we're going to look at the instance class setting. So this is the size of the computer running the database. In the description, we'll click this link, go to lesson 10, and then here, we'll follow the instructions to select the correct instance class for the database. And finally, we'll set a password. And now we'll scroll down to the bottom and click Apply. So AWS will set up a separate computer to run the database. And I already added some code in my e-commerce backend to connect to this database. So it should just work. If you have issues, please check the AWS troubleshooting guide. After that finishes, we can open the website again. And it still works. If we add something to the cart, notice that the database still works. And if we open the orders page, remember that earlier I created a new order, and now the orders are back to the default values. So this means that we're using the new MySQL database that we set up. And now our AWS setup looks like this. We have a load balancer, a backend, and it connects to a database on another computer. And this is getting even closer to a real-world setup. Next, if we go back to AWS, notice that to open our website, we use this default URL, which is really long. So now we're going to set up a domain name to make our website easier to access. A domain name is like mywebsite.com or youtube.com. It's a short name that makes it easy to access our website. So instead of putting this long URL in the browser, we can just type mywebsite.com and it will open this website. So I'll show you how to set up a domain name with AWS. First, we need to purchase a domain name. Most domain names cost around $10 or $20 per year. So this section is optional. If you already have a domain name that you purchased before and you want to use, feel free to skip to the next section. Otherwise, I'm going to show you how to purchase your own domain name. There are many services we can use to purchase domain names. I use a service called Namecheap for all my websites, like supersimple.dev. In the description, we'll click this link, go to lesson 10, and click here to go to Namecheap. So this is an affiliate link. If you decide to purchase a domain name using this link, part of your purchase will help support this channel. Thank you so much. Once we're on Namecheap, we're going to search for a domain name that we want. If you see a search box here, you can search for it. Otherwise, we can go to Domains and Domain Name Search. And we'll scroll down here and search for a domain name. So domain names are unique. Once they are taken, like youtube.com, we can't purchase it anymore. If you don't know what domain name you want, my recommendation is to try to register your first and last name. This might be useful for a personal website. So for me, it's Simon Bao, and we need to give it an ending, like .com. .com stands for commercial. It's the most popular ending for domain names. Now, you could pick another ending that you want, but be careful because some domain endings don't work with normal browsers. If you're not sure which ending you want, I recommend using .com or .net, just to be safe, because they are the most popular. So now, I'm going to click Search to see if this domain has already been taken. So it looks like this one has already been taken. So I'll just add something to it, like Simon Bao Eng or engineer. And this one is available. So you might need to modify your domain name to find one that works for you. So we'll add this to the cart and then open the cart. If you want to auto-renew this domain name, you can click here, and then we'll click Confirm Order. And if you don't have a Namecheap account, you'll need to create an account first. And after filling out all the information, we'll purchase the domain. And that's it. Now we have a domain name and we own a little piece of the internet. Once we have a domain name, we're going to set up the domain name in AWS. So we'll go back to AWS, and at the top, we're going to search for the service Route 53. And we're going to right-click this and open in a new tab. So Route 53 lets us manage our domain names in AWS. We can click Get Started and click Create Hosted Zones, and then click Get Started. If you don't see that, we can also click this menu here, click Hosted Zones, and then click Create Hosted Zone. A hosted zone lets us connect a domain name to our app. So currently, a hosted zone costs about 1.6 cents per day. So you can use it for free for a few hours. So here, we're going to enter the domain name that we have. So for me, it's simonbaoeng.com. And scroll down, and we'll leave it as a public, and then click Create Hosted Zone. And now, inside here, we're going to scroll down and click Create Record. So this sets where the domain name will go. We're going to leave the subdomain as blank, and we'll create an A record, and we're going to check alias. And here, we can select which AWS service we want to connect to. So for us, we're using Elastic Beanstalk, and we're going to choose the region. If we go back to the tab that's running Elastic Beanstalk, we can see the region up here. So for me, I'm using the region Ohio. So I'll go back to Route 53, and I'll search for the region Ohio, and select it. And we should see our app here. So I'll select that. And then scroll down and click Create Records. And finally, we need to tell Namecheap, or the company that you use for your domain name, to redirect to AWS. So inside Namecheap, or your domain company, we're going to go to the settings, and we're going to find the domain. So in Namecheap, it's in domain list. And here, you may need to verify your email. So we'll click this and check your email for the verification. So this might take a while, so we just have to wait until the verification is complete. And we may need to log out and log back in to our Namecheap account for the verification to update. Once verification is complete, we should be able to go back to the domain list, find our domain and open the settings for the domain. And in the settings, we're going to look for a section that's called Name Servers. If you're having trouble finding this in Namecheap or your domain company, please check the AWS troubleshooting guide in the description. And then in here, we're going to click this dropdown, and we're going to set custom DNS because we're going to use AWS for this. So now we need to enter some name servers. To find these, we're going to go back to AWS Route 53. And I need to zoom out a little bit to see this. Inside the hosted zone, we have some records here. And we're going to look for the record NS, or name server. So in the NS record, we should see these 4 URLs here. So we just need to copy these over to Namecheap or your domain company. So we'll select this and copy. And then inside Namecheap, in here, we'll paste. And we'll go back and select the second name server, copy, and paste. If we need to, we can add 2 more name servers. In here, we'll select this and copy. In here, we'll paste. And we'll select the last one, copy, and here, paste, and then save. So what this does is when we open our domain name in the browser, Namecheap is going to redirect to AWS. And then AWS will redirect to Elastic Beanstalk or to our app. So this setting will take a while to update. Sometimes it finishes in just 10 minutes, but it could take up to 24 to 48 hours. So we just have to be patient. So once we waited for a while, we can try opening a new tab. And in here, we'll type http:// and our domain name. So for me, it's simonbaoeng.com and press enter. And this will redirect to our app. So now we're able to access our React app using a short domain name that's easy to remember. Next, I'm going to explain why we enter HTTP in front and why we see this not secure warning here. So this means that our website is not using encryption. This means that any data we send to this website can be intercepted by a hacker. To enable encryption on this website and make it secure, we need to set up an SSL certificate, which is a special file that enables encryption. To get an SSL certificate, we can use AWS. So we'll go back to AWS Route 53, and then at the top, we'll search for another service called Certificate Manager, and click here. And we can request a certificate. If you don't see it, you can also go in here and click Request Certificate. We'll use the default value and click Next. And here, we're going to enter our domain name. Make sure to enter your domain name. And we'll scroll down and make sure DNS validation is selected. And scroll down and click Request. And then we'll wait for this to finish loading. And now, AWS needs to confirm that we own the domain name. That's why it says pending validation. To do that, we can just click this Create Records in Route 53 button. If you don't see this, please check the AWS troubleshooting guide. And it should show up here, and we'll click Create Records. And we'll wait for this to finish. We may need to refresh a few times until it says it was successful. And now that we have an SSL certificate, we can use this in Elastic Beanstalk. So we'll go back to Elastic Beanstalk. And then in the configurations here, we're going to scroll down to the instance traffic settings and click Edit. And we're going to scroll down until we find this Listeners section. And here, we'll click Add Listener. For the port, we're going to use 443. And for the protocol, we're going to use HTTPS. HTTPS means we're going to have a secure connection to our website, and this usually uses port 443. And here, we're going to choose the SSL certificate that we just created. And we should be able to leave the SSL policy blank and click Save. If that didn't work, please check the AWS troubleshooting guide. So this basically adds an SSL certificate to the load balancer. And now any data sent to our website will be encrypted. So we're going to scroll down and click Apply. And again, this will take a few minutes to complete. So we just have to wait for it. Once that's complete, I'll close some of these other tabs and I'll create a new tab. And in the URL, we're going to type https://. So this tells the browser to use the secure connection to our website. And then we'll type our domain name. For me, it's simonbaoeng.com and press Enter. So now the not secure warning is gone, and we're using a secure connection to our website that uses encryption. Also, now, if we just type our domain name in the URL without HTTPS in front and press Enter, it will default to using the secure version. So that's how we set up an SSL certificate and HTTPS in AWS. And now we have a professional and real-world setup for our React app. In this section, I'll show you how to delete everything we created in AWS. However, I recommend to do the exercises of this lesson first to get more practice with AWS and then do this deletion. Also, I try to keep everything we created in the free tier. The only exception is the hosted zone in Route 53. You can use it for free for a few hours. So you could keep running these services and practice AWS if you want. To check your AWS bill, we can go to the profile and click Billing and Cost Management. And now, after you finish the exercises, I'll show you how to delete everything just in case. So in Elastic Beanstalk, we can click this Actions dropdown and click Terminate Environment. And in here, we need to type the name of the environment, which is here, and click Terminate. Once that's finished, we can go up here and go to Route 53. And in this menu, we can go to Hosted Zones, and we'll open the hosted zone. And inside here, we're going to select the A record and the CNAME record and delete these records. And then at the top, we can delete the hosted zone. And in here, we'll type delete and click delete. Once that's finished, at the top, we'll go to Certificate Manager. And in this menu, we're going to click List Certificates. And we'll select the certificate and click Delete. Type delete and click delete. You can also delete your entire account if you want by clicking your profile and clicking account and then close account. although you'll lose access to the free tier if you do this. I usually keep my account open for a while to practice with the free tier. So now we put our React app on the internet and we created a professional real-world setup. And that's the end of this lesson. In this lesson, we learned AWS, or Amazon Web Services, which is a collection of services that help us put stuff on the internet. We learned EC2, which lets us rent a computer from AWS and is known as Infrastructure as a Service, or IaaS. We learned Elastic Beanstalk, which manages EC2 and sets up all the software that we need. This is also known as a Platform as a Service, or PaaS. We put our backend on the internet. We learned how to build and optimize the front end and put it on the internet. We learned how to deploy React without a backend. We added a load balancer and database to create a more real-world setup. And we learned how to set up a domain name, SSL certificate, and HTTPS for our website. Here are some exercises to help you practice what we learned in this lesson. In this lesson, we're going to learn some of the updates in the new version of React, and we'll learn how to use TypeScript with React. On the React website, there's a page that lists the updates in the new version of React. You can find a link to this page in the description. So there's a lot of changes here, and many of these changes are related to using React in a framework, which is basically a layer on top of React. For now, I'm just going to go over the changes that are related to this course. The first change is called Support for Document Metadata. So this means that we can put elements that normally go inside the head section, like the title, link, and meta elements, directly inside our component, like this. So this lets us change the head section when we render this component. For example, in our project, we used a title element to change the text in the tab when we switch pages. The way this works is when this component renders, React will put this title inside the head section, and this will change the text in the tab. Before React 19, we had to use an NPM package like React Helmet to do this. After React 19, we can just put these elements directly in our components, so it's easier. Another change is called ref as a prop. Earlier in this course, we learned about refs, and we can use a ref to get access to an HTML element directly. We can also give a ref to a component. For example, if we want to get an HTML element inside this component. Before React 19, ref was a special prop. We can't access it inside this component. We had to use a feature called forward ref. After React 19, ref is now a normal prop. We can access it like any other prop, and we don't need to know about forward ref anymore, so it's easier. The next change is the introduction of the React compiler. The React compiler optimizes our React code. For example, let's say we had a component like this. We have a counter and two other components inside. When we click the counter, this element will update, but it will also recreate these other two components, even though clicking the counter does not affect the other two components. That's because by default, when a component updates, it will also update or recreate all the components inside. And this may cause performance issues. To avoid this issue, before React compiler, we had to use three features: use memo, use callback, and memo. and this prevents a component from being recreated unless one of the props changed. So don't worry if you don't understand this code, because after the React compiler, the compiler will just add these optimizations automatically. And now we can just write our code as normal, and we don't need to worry about useMemo, useCallback, or memo anymore in most cases. So again, the React compiler optimizes our React code. All we have to do is to set up the React compiler, and we will get these optimizations. We don't have to change any of our code. Now let's learn how to set up the React compiler in our project. In the description, we'll click this link, go to lesson 11, and here we have the instructions for setting up the React compiler. I put the setup instructions here because this process might change in the future, and it's not easy to update the video. So follow the instructions that you see on your page. For me, the first step is to install the React compiler npm package. So I'm going to select this command and copy it. And then in my project, I'm going to go to the command line and create a new tab. And I'll close these other tabs so that I can start fresh. And first, I need to make sure I'm running inside ecommerce-project. So I'll cd ecommerce-project. And then I'll paste the command and press enter to install the React compiler npm package. And then I'll go back. And the next instruction is to copy this React config. So I'll select this config and copy it. And then I need to update vite.config.js and put that React config in here. So I'll go to the project and open vite.config.js. And at the top, I see this React config. So I'm just going to replace it and paste and save. And that's the setup. Again, the instructions might be different when you watch this video, so follow the instructions on your page. Next, let's check if the React compiler is working. So we'll go back to the instructions. And down here, we have some instructions for checking if React compiler is working. Again, follow the instructions on your page because they might have changed. So first, I'll start the backend and the frontend using npm run dev. I'll go back to VS Code, and in the command line, I'll create a new tab, and I'm going to go into the backend folder using cd ecommerce-backend and run npm run dev. And I'll go to the frontend tab, and I'll also run npm run dev. So now both of them are running. I'll go back to the instructions. And the next step is to install the React DevTools Chrome extension. So we'll click here. So this is an extension made specifically for React. It has a bunch of features that help us with React development. So here, we're going to add this extension to our browser. And once that's finished, I'll go back to the instructions. And the next step is, in your project, open the console and open the Components tab. So in VS Code, we're going to open this project in the browser. And I'm going to right-click and inspect. And in the console, we're going to click here, and we should have a new Components tab. So we'll click this. If it gets stuck, you can refresh. And this shows us all the React components that are on our page. If we scroll down, and if we look at our components, they should have a badge beside them called Memo. This means that the React compiler is working, and it's optimizing our React components. Now let's go back and look at some more changes in the new version of React. The next change is removed prop types and default props. So prop types were an older feature of React. It basically lets us check the type of a prop.